This hurricane bearing down on the folks in Florida has me feel in some sort of way. So I thought I would share a story for you. Kristen, this one's for you. We were texting the other day about hurricanes, and I mentioned that I had gone through a very strong hurricane on an island off the coast of Belize in 2000. So I just looked it up again to get some facts on exactly when it was, because it's kind of a blur, as you can imagine. And it was downgraded to like a tropical storm at some point. However, where we were at off the coast of Belize on Ambergris Key, the island itself, when it hit there, it was a category 3 to 4 hurricane, and it was absolutely terrifying. Earlier in 2000, my ex-husband and I had decided we were going to move to Belize, sold everything that we owned, and took our 2 very small children. Brianna was 18 months, and I think Aiden was about 6 months old, to the island, and we were just going to figure it out. Thankfully, we had a safe place to stay, and just before the hurricane came, my mother was visiting, and she had satellite television. So everybody on the island was kind of like, yeah, it's going to miss us, like not a big deal. My mother, however, thank God, had a satellite connection, and she was watching, the Weather Channel, the American Weather Channel. And she got scared, and her instincts or intuition or whatever said we need to prep for this storm. So we were the only people in town buying supplies to weather the storm. Wood to, put over the windows and other supplies we needed for in the house. We did forget to bring the propane in so that we could have used it to cook. However, a 4-wick candle does a good job in a pinch. So that hurricane and the, not the tidal wave, but just the storm surge completely enveloped the island. So it's a very small island. Thankfully, we were in a concrete structure, a concrete house on the 2nd floor. And the water came all the way up to the steps. It didn't quite come into the house, but it was very close, and it was right outside the door. And we listened to the winds at 120 miles an hour, 140 miles an hour, slowly pull the nails out of the roof. And it was a terrifying feeling. I've experienced a lot of mom guilt for even having my kids there in the first place. We had a really great time up to that point. And when the eye of the storm came through, they did come around in carts and said, with loudspeakers, and said, do not leave your house. This is just the eye of the storm. Continue to take shelter. So we were fortunate enough to be able to shelter in our home. There were, a lot of residents of the island that were in school buildings and storm shelters and other places that were safer than what they had to be in, because anybody who didn't have a 2nd floor something, it was completely covered in water. Like the whole ocean just took over the island. There was nothing to see, and we had a couple of contingency plans. Like our neighbor had a boat tied to his house that we thought perhaps in a real emergency we could swim to and get in, although that sounds horrible in hindsight. Do we get underneath the mattresses if things start coming through the ceiling? Like, what do we do? And thankfully the answer was we didn't have to do anything like that. We really just rode out the storm and tried to keep the children as happy as possible, as we were stuck inside for about a day and a half, about 2 days. When we were able to come outside and the storm had actually passed, most of our neighbors' houses were just completely ruined. Like, there was nothing left of them. The structures had washed away. There might be some foundations. Only the concrete structures remained. And we knew we needed to get off the island as soon as possible, especially with the kids. The stores had all been damaged. The ones that hadn't been damaged, or the things left that weren't terrible, were being looted and things taken, just plain survival. And in that environment, we knew we needed to get out of there. So we were fortunate enough to get on a plane. So the hurricane came up on us so quickly that people didn't evacuate the airport. So a lot of the planes on the island had been damaged in the storm. However, we had already had a ticket. we had a ticket to leave. Like, I don't know, many months later. We had bought it because it was cheaper to buy round trip tickets. Anyway, So we were able to use the tickets we already had as a negotiation tool to get on the first flight off of the island. So my mother, my ex-husband, and my 2 babies and I managed to get on the first flight off the island, and it took us to Belize City. Now, Belize City had been fairly heavily damaged with rain and floods and that sort of thing. However, we found a hotel that, said they were completely full. I'm sure that they were. And in this moment of complete despair, my mother took my 6-month-old son and set him on the counter and said, "We'll just wait right here until you find us a place to rest." As it turned out, the carpet was wet from flooding. We did not care. The beds were fine. We needed to sit down and chill out, and we were able to get out of Belize City and back to the United States, I believe, the next day. It was quite an experience, one I won't forget, and I hope that none of you ever have to have it. If you are in Florida and getting ready for this big storm to bear down on you, if there's anything I can do to be of assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out.